We're going to be talking about part 5 of my series on Back to the Basics with Adobe Photoshop. Great to see so many of you here, more of you coming into the room as we speak. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone, and happy to be here. Happy Friday, everybody. So with that said, welcome, and if this is your first time, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the Creative Cloud channel, and if this is not your first time, welcome back. So let me make sure I got my chat window and everything going here, and we guys got you going. Looks like everything's up and running, and welcome. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and jump into things. Let's go ahead and pick up kind of where we left off. I think the last one I did of these had to do with layers, so that's going to really come in handy today as we start compositing and putting things together. So hang on one sec. Just make sure everything else is going there, and good. All right. Okay, so you guys feel free to chime into the chat if you have questions. Let me go ahead and silence my device here. And we can get right into it. All right. Cool. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my computer so you guys can see what I'm doing here. I've got Adobe Photoshop CC open and ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do, of course, is I'm going to start bringing in images that I want to composite together. Now, where you get those images from, meaning whether you open them from your, something that's already sitting on your hard drive, or whether you use a Creative Cloud library and just drag and drop them in. Doesn't really matter how you open your images as long as you get at least 2 or more images open. Now, you can composite images together by simply opening the first image, like your base layer, and then dragging new images into it, or you can have the windows side by side and then drag and drop or copy and paste the layers that way. So I'm going to go up to my file menu where I've got some images kind of sitting here waiting for me. Let me go into my Creative Cloud folder. And in my Creative Cloud folder, I've got a folder here called, let me view this by name so I can find it quicker. There it is. And I've got a couple wedding images, or basically it's the bride, and it's kind of the same image, or same bride, I should say, just 2 different shots of her looking over to the left, and then one of her looking down. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the one of her looking, I think we'll open up the one of her looking down first. Hey Skip, hey Ram, hey Patricia, welcome everybody. And now that I've got this image open, I'm going to go ahead and open up the next one. Now, I can do this a couple of different ways. Like I said, I can go ahead and open the second one, or you could use the place command and place it so that it's inside this one, and that will just save an extra step. So since we're kind of teaching basics and kind of teaching people, hopefully the right or maybe more efficient way to do things, since I know I want to put that image on this one, I'm going to go ahead and place it. But before I do that, since you won't always have that luxury, I'm going to go ahead and open it up and show you the other way to do it first. So I think this is the one we didn't open, so let's go and open up that one second. Now it's going to, of course, open it up, and it's just going to have 2 windows or 2 tabs open side by side. So we got the one on the left, and we got the one on the right, and they're kind of the same, same bride, but again, 2 different poses. What we're going to do is we're going to take the one on the, let's see which one. This one has more canvas area. Maybe I should use this one as my base, because that also leave me some room if I want to put some text or something. So let's use this as the base. We're going to take this one and move it over to the other one. Hey, Victoria, great to see you here as well. So now, how can I do that? Well, if I take the move tool, here's one way to do it. I can go ahead and just start dragging this image, even though it's not moving. As soon as I hold down my mouse and get to the tab, the other one will pop open, but don't let go yet until you drag down anywhere into the frame. Once you drag down into the frame, then it will go ahead and copy it over. So it's kind of one of those things where you're trusting that it's doing it because you don't really see any visual reference or any visual indication that it did anything until you actually let go. Once you let go, then you'll see it there, and it will be there as its own layer. So you can see it in the layers panel. Now, of course, we can move this around in the layers panel. I'm going to put it on this side, but what I would ultimately want to do is flip it over. So again, we just showed one way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that layer because that's not the ultimate way we're going to show it. I'm going to show you one more way, and that's, what if you just want to drag it from left to right? In other words, instead of dragging it from the bottom to the tab and down, I want to drag them side by side. Well, I can't see them side by side because right now they're in tabs, and usually you can only see one tab at a time. However, and Skip, I'm glad you got something out of that explanation. I'm going to go ahead and arrange my windows and tile them vertically. Now, when I tile them vertically, oh, now I can see them side by side. And of course, this is the old way we used to do it. Just drag one into the other one, and there you go. So that's visually easier to do it because you can see the one you're dragging over to the one you're dragging it to. And of course, when you're done, you can go back to arrange and say consolidate to all tabs to put it all back to the way it was. So that's the second way to do it. But that's not the ultimate way. Let's go ahead and close this. Delete that layer one more time. And let's go ahead and close. Let's see, this is the one we want to close. Okay, so now we're in Beautiful Bride number 1. We want to bring Beautiful Bride into this. And like I said, so the better way to do this is once you have your base image open and you want to bring in that next one, is you want to go ahead and place it. So let's go ahead and do File, Place. Patricia, oh God, is that a good oh God or a bad oh God? All right, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and explain the two different places. Before, you didn't have two choices. You just had place. Now you have place embedded and place linked. What's the difference? Place embedded takes the other image that we're about to bring in, puts it in this image, and has no connection to the original anymore. So, in other words, if I go in and change Bride later on, the one I copied into here, won't be changed. Place linked says, place it as a link in this file, so that way if the original ever gets changed, edited, whatever, it can update this file too. So since I'm not going to go in and make any changes to the original file, in other words, this is a great workflow when you're going to use the same thing in multiple places, multiple different images, so you can go and update it once and it will update it across the board, but I'm just going to do place embedded. So that will ask me, well, what do you want to place? I want to place this one. And then boom, it's just there. So that way I don't have to do the whole drag and drop thing. It just places it on the canvas. Now, notice it placed it with free transform selected. So that means while free transform is selected, I can scale it, I can move it around, I can do whatever I want to do, including flip it, because I want her facing the other way. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say flip horizontal while that free transform is still there. That way I've got the bride facing herself basically. She's going to be looking at herself on the right and looking down from the left version. So of course we can't see the other one because it's underneath, but I'm going to go ahead and pull this one all the way over to that side. And then whenever I'm done, whatever it is I'm doing, scaling, whatever, when I'm done, I hit the Enter key on my keyboard or the check mark up here to commit the thing I just did. So in other words, commit, bring it over. Now, of course, we have the bride on the left. We have the bride on the right. We can't see the bride on the left because the bride on the left, or we can't see the bride on the right because the bride on the left is covering. So now we can get an idea of what this composite's going to look like by simply lowering temporarily the opacity of the layer that's on top. So I'm going to take the opacity slider and just drag it down. Okay, great. And if I drag it all the way down, she disappears. If I drag it up, she's there. Now, there are some challenges with this composite. Because they both are carrying the flowers, obviously, they both have the hands carrying the flowers. I have to really pick and choose which one I want to show more of. And I think I want to show more of this one and only show a little of this one. So in other words, I want these flowers, not those flowers, because in other words, I'm going to treat this one as my main subject, and this one's going to be like ghosted in. Now, before I even worry about the ghosting in part, and this is just another thing about compositing, I want to, of course, cover some of this layer so we can see through it. In other words, I want to make some of this layer transparent. Now, you might be tempted to grab an eraser or some kind of tool to start erasing this. And that's a destructive workflow that usually will come back to bite you, because at some point you're going to wish you had some of that image back, or you're going to need some of it. When you mask, then you're always working in a non-destructive workflow, because you can always unmask. You can save the file, come back two months from now and say, oh, I want those flowers back, and unmask and get them back. So if we look at my layers panel, we've got the one on the left, we got the one on the right. And what I'm going to do is even rename them to make them simpler to know. Bride left. And we're going to make this one bride, bridge, bride, right. Okay, so now we've got both layers. We can turn them on and off, and they're there. And now what I want to do is, for this bride left layer, I want to go ahead and click the magic button at the bottom of the layers panel, add layer mask. Because when I add a layer mask, that will give me this white rectangle that says, okay, white means everything's exposed. We can see everything. We can see the entire layer. And when I go ahead and choose, when I put black on this rectangle, that means hide part of the layer. So for example, if I were to grab my paintbrush now, and I were to reset my colors back to black and white, and start painting with black, let's make a bigger brush. I will start, let's turn off smoothing. There we go. I will start to see the bride on the left-hand side. So this is unmasking that layer. Now, like I said, I want to see more of the bride on the left side. So I want to go ahead and mask quite a bit of that layer, because we're going to use those hands and those flowers. So that's one way to do it. But now we're running into a situation, well, actually we can keep going. Yeah, if we just keep going, we're okay. I was going to say we're running into a situation with the hands being weird, but that's okay for now. We'll keep it the way it is. So basically, all I'm doing is just painting black on that layer mask, making sure I get it all, to reveal or hide, I should say, hide the top layer so that we can see more of the layer below it. So if we look at the mask, that's what I just painted. I'm holding down my Option or Alt key, clicking on the mask so that we can see the mask and see what just got painted. Now, if I, again, lower the opacity, I can kind of make that like ghosted out the way I really want it to be. But what's bothering me now is I went a little crazy with the brush over on this side. And so what I want to do is unmask part of that. So for example, what does that do? So luxury card store is asking, hey, when you started masking, you turned off smoothing. Why'd you do that, and what does it do? Well, smoothing is actually, it's more for doing brush strokes where you need to predict or smooth out a stroke, like if I'm painting basically. If I'm trying to paint a curve or paint an S, then smoothing will help me do that. I'm not painting in this case. I'm just using the brush to cover something up. So I don't need smoothing on. In other words, it's more of a distraction to have it on than to have it off at this point. So that's why I turned it off. But if I were actually using the paintbrush to create something, that's when I would want smoothing on. But to use the brush to mask something, no, I don't need smoothing for that. I'm just painting. All right, so with that said, now I'm on the mask, and I was like, oh no, I kind of got rid of a little too much. So I'm going to switch the colors back to black, to white on black, or white as my foreground color. Make my brush a little smaller. And that way I can unmask. In other words, I can say, no, 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 bring some of this back because some of this is actually useful. So I don't want her arm to partially disappear like it was doing. So I can kind of bring some of that back, and you can get really small and zoom in and work with a really small brush and get exactly what you're looking for. I'm also working with a Wacom Cintiq so that I'm pressure sensitive. So now I can press very lightly just to kind of blend that in very nicely. Okay, so that's more of the look I'm looking for. Oops, go to the other color. That's more the look I was looking for. It's kind of like she's kind of looking at herself, but again, we don't want them to be twins. So I don't want the one on the left to really be there. I want the one on the left to be more of a ghosted image. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and take the opacity of that top layer, which that's my top layer, and just bring it down. In other words, give me a ghosted image of that. Sort of like that. There we go. So that's my composite. Now at this point, it's just tweaking it to taste. I could add some text on the right-hand side about the wedding. I can put some thought bubbles on there. Anyway, you get the idea. I can do whatever I want at this point because the main concept for my composite is there. I wanted to put the second photo of the bride and composite it in nicely and kind of blend it in so that it's more of a ghosted image, but with the eye contact, she looks like she's looking at herself, and this one looks like she's looking down at the flowers the other one's holding. So that was the idea, that was the concept. Okay, so at this point, if I wanted to continue, again, I can grab my type tool. And I can come over here and click. And I can go ahead and type something like our beautiful day. All right, one more time. And we've got that in a nice script. Let's see what other scripts we have. I'm going to try and stay away from my favorite script of all time because I use it every single time. So let's use something else. That's Falcon Script. Falcon Script's not bad. Serena's a little too thick. This might work. Man's Premium. Separate that onto 3 lines, and then we'll go ahead and just drag that out to be bigger. All right, still not crazy about that script. My favorite's my favorite, but anyway, just to have something different. Now also, if I want to make that a different color, we'll just go ahead and use one of the colors that's already in the image. So I just popped up the color picker, and now I can use one of the colors like from the flower to kind of quickly change that to something a little bit more attractive. All right. Okay, so that was one way to do a composite. And Hattie says, that really looks nice, nice idea. Kind of looks like a reflection in the mirror. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Cool way to think about it, reflection in the mirror. And Skip, thanks for watching me, and glad that I can help you in a virtual mentorship. All right, so now, one way to composite. Let's keep going. I'm going to save this out, close it. Let's save this out as Bride Composite. And now keep in mind, I'm saving this in the Photoshop format, PSD, because that way I'll always have the layers to be able to come back to and continue working with. I can always come back and unmask, and I can always hide a layer, turn a layer on and off. I've not done anything destructive to this at all. Change the type, anything. As long as I keep it in the PSD or at a minimum TIFF format. If you put it as a JPEG, you do something else, that's fine to share, but make sure you keep a copy that's the layered PSD file that you can always come back and edit. All right, so we'll save that one, we'll close it, and let's do something else. Let's go in and I'm in a compositing library here. I'm gonna do an Adobe stock search for forest. All right, so that will find me some nice forest pictures. Those are all pretty cool. How about dark forest? See if that comes up. Oh, yeah, now we got some darker ones there. I saw one that I've used before. So I'm just trying to get something to have something as a background to composite on. And nope. It's kind of one of those, you'll know it when you see it. I'm going to go and pick, I guess I'll pick this one. Now, if I knew I wanted this one, I'd go ahead and license it. But since I'm not quite sure yet, I'm just going to go ahead and download a preview of it. So when you download a preview, that's a low-res, watermarked preview that you can use to test, play with, composite with. And then if you really like it, you can license it if you want. If you don't, then you can just, you've not spent any money on it or any invested time in it. So I'm going to go ahead and double-click on that. Like I said, it comes up with a watermark on it, the file number, because I haven't licensed that one yet. As soon as I license it, that stuff will go away. Now I want to bring up my subject that I'm going to go ahead and put on this. So let me go to my other library. I think it's this one. No, it's not this one. Although I could use this. But I'm going to go ahead and, you know what? Let's use... Go to my Adobe stock library. Let's use one of these guys. I've used these guys before and cut them out. Let's use this. I've used this one a ton of times. Let's use something new. So now I'm going to take this guy that's on a totally different background and drag it over. So kind of the same concept that we had before where we did a place embedded. This is doing a place linked. So it will be linked to that original file. Now I'm going to go ahead and commit to it. That's all I want. And now I need to cut him out so we can see him without this, looks like garage door behind him, and we can actually see him on the forest. So this is another attempt or type of compositing. Whenever you're cutting someone out with hair, the challenge is always for Photoshop to kind of figure out where the hair is versus whatever the background is. So blonde hair on a beige background, not going to be easy. Black hair on a white background, much easier. So it's really about contrast. It's really about Photoshop being able to distinguish what the difference is. Skip's asking, can I use a 3D model? Yeah, I could. I don't know that I have one handy, but yeah, I could use a 3D model in this as well because Photoshop does support 3D. All right, so now that I've got this in place, I'm going to go to my Quick Select tool. And the Quick Select tool, I would have normally started selecting him. But now with the latest version of Photoshop, Quick Select just got a whole bunch easier, or a lot easier, because there's Select Subject at the very top. So when I click Select Subject, I don't have to do anything. I just wait a couple seconds. It figures out what the subject is, and it just did. And now all I have to do is continue the process with Select and Mask. If he didn't have hair, like if he was bald or just had a hat on or whatever, I'd be done. I could just cut it out. But because we're losing some of the hair, it would look like we cut it out with a pair of scissors. So we don't want that. So let's go in and let's do Select and Mask. Now when I do Select and Mask, whoa, right off the bat, that looks pretty good. It's not there yet because we can still see some of the gray in the background and the hair still looks like it's been cut out kind of harshly. So what I can do is I can bring some of that background back. So I'm on onion skin view, and with the transparency slider, I can see what I would get if I were to click OK now versus what I started with. Rather than look at that, sometimes I like to look at it because sometimes I might miss stuff, and I like to look at it maybe on a red background or a black background so I can kind of see what's really there. You can look at it on white, whatever color makes sense to you. You can look at the mask itself. I can see that it's pretty hard mask for hair. So let's go to, for example, a red overlay. Now, a couple things I'm going to do. I usually always turn on Smart Radius. That kind of helps on the things that aren't hair, like keeps the shirt nice and sharp and the hair nice and smooth. I can also, of course, see that I'm missing part of his arm. So when I'm done with this, I'm probably going to move it over to that side of the canvas. And then once I got a little smart radius turned on, the next thing I'm going to do is switch to the refine edge brush. I make this much smaller. And we're just going to kind of brush the edges of his hair, trying to eliminate some of that gray and bring back some of the edges of hair that might have been missed. So that will recalculate the mask based on the background that I'm dragging it on. So again, depending on what the background looked like will determine if you get a good mask or not, and you might have to do more work. So far the edges aren't great, they aren't horrible, they're kind of somewhere in between, so I'm going to do a couple things to kind of help me with this. Now you have shift edge, which kind of helps pull it in or rein it in a little bit, and do a little shift edge. And also if whatever the background was reflecting into the hair, like right now I'm on a green screen, and you can't see it, but if I were to take a picture of me on the green screen, some of that green would more than likely be reflected on me. So you have another option called Decontaminate Colors. Now, Decontaminate Colors used to really do sometimes a really hard edge, and now you have a slider for Decontaminate Colors that lets you pull back a little bit and say, no, not so hard. So you can adjust the decontamination. Once you're done, you can output it any way you want, but I want to output this as a new layer with a mask. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And that gives me a nice edge for it to work with. And I have the layer mask if I want to continue masking later, if I miss something. Now we can pick him up because we are on our own new layer. And we can move him over to that side because his shoulder was obviously touching the side before. And we've got him in place. Now, the one thing that usually will make a composite look like you made a composite, in other words, to make it look like he really wasn't in that forest when this picture was taken, is the difference in lighting, the difference in shadows, the difference in darkness and exposure. So there's all kinds of things that are a dead giveaway that he wasn't really in that forest. Look at how green the forest is. Look at the light of the forest. Look at how pale and kind of natural lit he looks. Now, it's not horribly different, but it is different. So one of the things we do is we kind of take some of that background, turn it into a layer so that we can use it to colorize the foreground, the subject. So the way I do that is I first just make a selection of the background based on the subject, and we have that nice mask to use. So if I were to go ahead and just hold down my Command key on the Mac, PC Control key, and click, that will give me that nice cutout, including the extra space over here that I don't need. So let's go ahead and simply remove that. I use my rectangle marquee tool and hold down my Option key because I don't need this area selected. Just remove that from the selection. All right, so now that I've got that selection made, in other words, just a selection of the subject, I guess I could have used select subject too. But anyway, I'm going to now just simply switch layers. I'm going to switch to the background layer. So the selection doesn't change when you switch layers. So it still says I'm cutting out the shape of this guy, or I'm selecting the shape of this guy. Now you're on a different layer, selecting the shape of this guy. And now that I'm on that different layer, which is the background, I'm going to duplicate just that selection onto its own layer. To do that, it's Command J on the Mac, PC Control J. That's basically new layer via copy. That's the keyboard shortcut for it. So now, if we were to look at it, that's what it looks like. All right. So now we're going to take that new layer via copy, layer 1, and we're going to call this our color layer. We're going to take our color layer and move it up to the very top. So now it's covering everything, covering him. Then we're going to take that layer, we're going to take all that green and brown and a little bit of the white from the Adobe stock, and we're going to blend it all together into one color. And we're going to let Photoshop do that. We're going to go to the filter menu, come down to blur, and do an average. That will take the average of everything that's in that layer and average to get together to a new color. In this color, the case it's a light green. It will be whatever color the average of all those colors comes out to be. I kind of expected it to be a little on the green side. All right, George, greetings. All right, so now that we got that layer in place, obviously, that's a little too green and a little too solid. So we want to use a blending mode called color to blend that layer into the layer below. So that makes him greener. He's a little too Kermit green. So obviously we need to drop the opacity. We don't want it to be 100% of that green on him. So I'm going to drop the opacity of that layer down to in the 30s, maybe something around 38, 39. And this is before, where he's a little warm, a little pink tonish, versus after, where it's kind of blending in a little bit, almost a little Walking Dead-ish. So we might want to turn down a little bit more. He's kind of blending into that background. In other words, if we were to photograph him in the natural environment he's in, he probably would be a little greener with all of that green around him. Evil Cerise, what's up, man? Happy Friday. And Skip, yes, a little too Walking Dead-ish. In other words, that would be, no, we don't want to go that far. Let's pull it down. Again, do this to taste. That's a little too pink. Maybe something, a 31, no, maybe around the 30-ish opacity range. That's still looking like he's still alive, and it's still it gives him that green tone. Now, of course, there are other things you might want to do to this layer. So, for example, I could select that layer. I could use my filter menu and convert for smart filters, basically create a smart object of that layer. And then I can go to my filter menu one more time and go to Camera Raw Filter. Because in the Camera Raw Filter, I get sliders to make things easier. I get a nice preview. So for example, I might want to, now of course it's showing me the original. I might want to drop the exposure down a little bit. It's not going to show it to me until I render it, so sorry about that. I don't get a preview, maybe that. So in other words, that's at 100%. In other words, once that's at his current exposure, I might want to drop it down to maybe, can I go as low as a half a stop? All right, maybe not. Maybe that. Negative 0.35. So when I click OK, see, there it didn't look like it did as much. So let me go back to it and drop it down some more. So that's why I converted it to a smart filter. So that way I can always double click and get right back to, there we go. So now we're making it look more like he was there versus that, where obviously he was on a different background, but he just doesn't look like he was from that environment when the photo was taken. So that makes your subject look more like they were there. Now, if this were a full-length subject, the other thing that, no zombies, please. The other thing that you would do is, another kind of natural giveaway is the amount of light all the way down your subject. Like his shirt looks really bright. Like we kind of got his face and his hat kind of where the tone of this forest would be, but his shirt still looks very bright. Now it could just be the sun's hitting his shirt, just like that patch of straw or grass behind him looks pretty bright too. But we would probably want to tone that down a bit too, so that we don't have as bright of a shirt in this dark forest as well. So we could do that a couple of ways. We could go back into Camera Raw Filter. We could use the adjustment brush and just brush his shirt to be a lower exposure. We could use another mask, or we can duplicate the layer, use another mask, use a gradient. We can kind of tone it down gradually that way. Lots of different ways to do it. But since I'm in Camera Raw already, let's go back to Camera Raw one more time. This is all non-destructive. I could go back into the adjustment brush. I could choose not dehaze, but let's go to exposure. Let's drop exposure down just a bit. And then I could just tone his shirt down a bit, tone the bottom part of his body down a bit. So once I paint that in, then of course I have exposure to really drop it down. You can also see spots I might have missed. There we go. And now I can control just that area of the photo with a slider. So let's drop his shirt down a bit more. Click OK. Yeah, that's better. Because, you know, again, in this dark, unless you were photographing him with lights, that shirt wouldn't be that bright in this forest. So Basically what I'm trying to say is when you're doing a composite, start asking yourself, what would it really look like if they were on that background? Would they be as bright? Would they be as dark? Would they be as in focus? Would they be as not as, and all the different things? Would they be as tall? Would they be as short? Especially when you're putting it next to something. You have to just ask yourself, if you walked in here and looked at this, would this look real? And if you still see little things that say, no, it's not quite like he was there, start doing the things that would make it look like he or she were there. All right. Cool. So we got a different kind of composite in place, and that was just using the photograph, cutting it out with select subject, using refine edge, and then using some techniques to kind of make it more of the color of the background and more of the exposure of the background, and kind of tone it down to, I'm looking at that screen over there where he looks really green, but on my screen it looks pretty natural. So if it looks too green on your screen, just know that that's your screen. It could be a little less green. George says, I think he needs to be a little smaller. Okay, George. All right, let's say I agree with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these layers, the color layer as part of him, this layer. Now here's another technique. I can I don't want to combine those yet. I want to keep them separate, so I can group them together in a group. And I can call this guy. So now that that's together, I can twirl that folder down so it's all of these things. But while I have guy selected, I can hit Command T or PC Control T for free transform, and I can scale him down. And I think I kind of agree with you, because again, you look at the size of his head, you look at the trees behind him. Would he really be that big if he was that far away from the trees, or that close to the trees, I should say? So you might want to tone him down a little bit. We can't raise him up because we don't have any body below this. So there's a point where you can't make him too much smaller, because then it won't make sense either. So I would say something right about there. But now that was allowing me to scale all of this stuff at the same time. So if there were 10 layers in there and I wanted to scale them all at once, I would group it together in a folder. That way I can scale the whole folder, move the whole folder, do anything I want to the whole folder or layer group, and it happens to the whole group. All right, so that's yet another composite. And again, if I choose now to say, yeah, I really like that background, I could license that background, and it would get rid of the Adobe stock and the file number, and it would be high res, which is more important. All right, so let's go ahead and save it for now. And it's called Summer Forest, but I'm going to save it to I'm going to call it Forest Composite. All right, there we go. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and close that one. Let's see if I think I got time for one more. Let's see what we can come up with here. See if I can think of another. Oh, you know what? I got another one I want to do. I want to do this one for fun. Let's see if I can find it here. I want to do the one where people are always like, they're always doing it or trying to do it, or it doesn't really look that great. They're trying to like I did this Skyfall poster using Rufus here, my manager. So let's bring Rufus in, and we're going to go ahead and rotate him. And we're going to go ahead and just open this image up. So this is my manager. It looks great, but we want to make kind of that, that poster look to it. We want to put his head on a different body, so in other words. So I'm sure somewhere in my Adobe stock, let's see if we search this library. Let's see if I can find the guy with the tux. So I'm sure, yep, there he is. I've done this before. So we're going to bring this guy over. So this is the head we want to replace with Rufus's head. So this is kind of one of the things that people are always trying to do, and we're going to try and make this look a little bit better. All right, what's the difference between saving as a TIFF and saving as a PSD? Good question. Saving as a TIFF has probably most of the benefits of a PSD. I like to do PSDs because then I know it's compatible. In other words, I know the PSD format is kind of just a personal preference. I know the PSD format won't lose anything. It is the format. TIFF is more compatible outside of Photoshop with other things. Technically, you shouldn't be losing anything, but I prefer PSD because I know PSD will, as a container, will contain every single thing I can do in Photoshop. But as far as layers are concerned and just saving it out, you should be okay with TIFF as well. All right, so with that said, this is our subject. In other words, we want to get Rufus's head onto this. I'm going to show you the technique for that. And then if we have time, we can even composite this onto a different background altogether. But let's say that we want to get this over here. Now, obviously, one guy is shot further away, so we see more of his body. Rufus is shot more up close, so we see less of his body. Obviously, this is going to make his head bigger than the other guy's head because they're just at a different range. So we're going to have to work with that as well. So same technique we used before. We're going to use the move tool. Start dragging. You won't see anything move. Drag up to that layer, or I'm sorry, that tab, and then drag down into the image, then let go, and you'll see it. Oh, actually, this is a lower res, so the head size might be about right. Now, I can't tell. Is his head too big, too small? One way to quickly tell is lower the opacity. Now, what I like to do, here, let me zoom in a little bit. What I like to do is get the eyes lined up. Because if the eyes line up, the head's probably about the right size. If the eyes are way too big or too small, then you probably need to work on the size some more. So if I grab my free transform again, and let's see, I would say right about there. Kind of creepy. Now, of course, they're not going to be exact. They're not going to match the exact width. Well, I guess I could make them match the exact width, but they're not going to match the exact width. But we kind of want to get it right there. Now, see, it still, to me, looks like, okay, there's just a difference in chin. Now, the other thing I have to worry about, okay, that's the original guy's neck going out to that collar. Rufus's neck is going to be a little different, so we're going to have to deal with that difference as well. But that's kind of the right position at least. All right, so now that I got him in the right position, same thing as we did before. So we're going to go in, and we're going to go in and select the subject first. Let's zoom out a little bit. Actually, let's zoom in a little bit, and then scroll down. There we go. So we're going to hit the quick select tool, select subject, which should easily select Rufus. There he is. Now we're going to go select and mask. And wow, did a nice job cutting him out already. There's not a whole lot I need to do. But we're just going to go ahead and just do our usual things. And then we're going to go ahead and try and make sure his hair blends in nicely with that background. All right, good, good, good. So I'm just using the Refine Radius brush and brushing around his hair to kind of get some of that gray background out of his hair so it blends into the new background. Okay, so now if I were to just want to look at it and test it real quick, I can go to Onion Skin and I could, I can see I got a little bit of a halo there. Do a little bit more shift edge. That's about right. Right about there. I'll say that's pretty good. All right, so now we'll go ahead and again, output that to a new layer with a mask. Okay, and so now we got Rufus cut out. So we got to do a couple of things. We need to get rid of more of Rufus's body. We need to get rid of the other guy's head. So we can do this, whichever way is easier. Let's hide Rufus for a minute. Let's get rid of this other guy's head. Now, he's on the original background, and I want to basically, it doesn't really matter whether I use the original background or not, but let's say I want to duplicate it for the sake of having a fallback position. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the layer, turn off the background, and now I could clone his head out. I could patch his head out. I can just, basically I'm just trying to get rid of his head. I don't need to really even get rid of all of his head, but the stuff that's sticking out on the side definitely has to go. So maybe I'll take the patch tool on this layer, select his head. And again, the patch will not be perfect, especially down there, but that's okay. And we can just drag it over. That should blend his head into the background nicely, except for that area down here, which is fine. And we could then work with that. So now I could turn Rufus back on and see if that is that enough. We're gonna have to deal with that part on the right-hand side. So, and also I might need to move Rufus over a little bit since we now have no other head to compete with. Oops, wrong layer. There we go, let's move this. So I would say using the move tool, move him over maybe right about there. All right, okay. So now, if we need to get rid of more head, we can. But for now, we need to get rid of, probably move that down a bit. There we go. Probably need to get rid of more of Rufus. So let's go ahead and we already have a mask for him. So we can go ahead and just use the paintbrush, just like we used earlier today. Switch to black paint when we start painting. Oh, sorry. Paint on the actual mask. There we go. Start painting and removing Rufus's body that we don't need. And again, this is non-destructive. That way, if we ever like paint it out too much, we can always bring it back. And that starts to look good. There we go. Good, good, good. All right. So now that's part of the other guy's head. So let's first of all get Rufus. Now see, we can't bring Rufus's head down anymore. We can make it bigger, but we can't really bring it down anymore because I don't think he has a top of the head left. So let's see. Oh, wrong guy. Oh, he does. He's got some more hair up there. Good. All right, good, good, good. That helps. If he didn't, that was going to be harder. All right, that's about right. So let's go ahead and again, continue working on that mask. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. I should have done that first before the selected mask, and then I wouldn't have to deal with this. But nonetheless, easy enough. I'm just masking out some of that obvious gray. And if I really need to mask, I can even mask some more of that hair out of there. All right. Same thing on this side. So you guys can see what I'm doing here. And you know what? I don't really care. No one's going to miss those few hairs. All right, there we go. Okay, so now let's, for the sake of time, let's do that. All right, so now let's go ahead and zoom out. Not bad, but we got some former head neck issues to deal with. So we need to go in, back to the original guy. Actually, some of that is Rufus, some of that is the other guy. Let's make sure we get all of this done first. And we want to get rid of all of that. And all of this. All right. Rufus has a new haircut anyway. Yeah, he does. This is an old picture. You know, it's funny. He saw me do this. Tutorial once. He was like, "Why didn't you just say so? I would have taken a picture with a tuxedo." And I was just laughing. I was like, "Well, because then we wouldn't need to do it." All right. Okay. So now we have a couple of things we can do. Number one, we can go back to our background, which is that. And we can say, okay, let's mask that layer as well. And oh, we can't mask it. Actually, it doesn't matter because that layer is that layer. So let's use our clone stamp tool. So I hit the letter S, hold down the Option or Alt key, and I'm just going to clone some of this background clone some of the background onto what used to be the other guy's collar. Then we might need to clone some neck, like so. Don't worry, I'll make it all look pretty in just a minute. I'm just trying to get rid of the black bow tie or collar. Oh, this is Rufus's jacket collar, I believe, or shirt collar. So I'm just trying to get rid of all of that stuff first. All right, and then we go here. Kind of bring that down. This guy really has a big neck. Rufus doesn't have a big neck. So that's part of the challenge when you're trying to make this stuff look better, look real. Now, if I zoom out, so yeah, see that guy's neck is much thicker than Rufus's head. So technically, either we would need to scale that guy down or bring Rufus up. It's either one of the two. And I like Rufus's head, the size it is, for the body that it's going to go in. So really what I want to do is reduce the width of that neck. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that is with the Liquify filter. So if I go to the background, select it. If I go to filter, I could convert for smart filter so it's non-destructive at this point. And then I can go to Liquify. And what I want to do is zoom in on this area and then use my width tool, which is the top tool, make the brush a lot smaller and literally push this in. So in other words, we're just pulling that neck in a little bit so that it would match Rufus's head a little bit better. This guy had a really big neck. So just pulling the sides of the neck in. Pull some of that collar down too. And now when I click OK, fits better. So now at this point, if the skin tone of Rufus's face didn't match the neck, which it actually matches pretty good, I would go ahead and start changing that. The other thing you got to remember to look at too, while you're working with skin tones, especially if you're putting someone of color on someone that's not of color, things like that, you got to make sure you work with the hands too. The hands would be the dead giveaway of, oh God, that's not that person's body. But we kind of got away with it. Now, I'm sure there's some edges in there I probably need to clean up. But for the most part, not bad. And especially at a distance, not bad. But we just basically gave this guy a new head. All right, so that was the original. This is where we started. Oh, it's still open. Let's do that. That's where we started. And that's where we ended up. Again, at this point, it'd just be a little bit more tweaking. We could, maybe warm, because this guy's got a little bit warmer tone to his skin. We could maybe warm Rufus up a little bit. So let's do that real quick. And then we're just about at the top of the hour, just about out of time anyway. So this is the head we're dealing with, right? So now if I wanted to warm him up, because notice this guy's hands are nice and warm, nice and a little bit more pink to him. Rufus isn't as warm toned in this particular photo. So once again, convert for smart filter so it's non-destructive. Go into the camera raw filter. And in the camera raw filter, you've got temperature. So we just warm that up just a little bit more. And also maybe mess with the tint because that guy was kind of reddish. Not a ton, just a subtle difference. Click OK. Now look at the face compared to the hands. It looks a bit more natural. Or the opposite. If you like the face the way it was, then you could also just lighten up the hands. So the hands would be more in tune. Or I should say cool the hands off a little bit. Someone's suggesting bring the head down a bit. That's a possibility. Let's see. Yeah, I agree. Maybe something like that. Now we can play with moving it over. Get it more centered. Rufus is just shaking his head side to side. He can't believe this is going on. All right, I would say, yeah, I agree. I agree with that call. Move it down a bit and over to the, I don't know now, right or left a little bit, maybe right there. I'm just using my arrow keys and the move tool to kind of get it in position. All right, and that becomes, we get rid of the top of that. That becomes our final. Let's zoom in up there and clear that stuff up. Ooh, that's kind of weird. There we go. I was going to say it wasn't showing. So again, that's hiding behind that mask. So I could either go double click to get into that and mask it some more, which is probably the better option. Let's go into, and also while I'm here, I can see a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up. So let's get all of this out of here. All of that needs to be cleaned up. None of that should be showing. There we go. And to do the hair justice, I'm going to need to zoom in and work with a smaller brush. And also where hair is maybe being cut off, we can switch colors and bring that hair back. Bring those edges back. So now I'm going to close that, save it. Why didn't it fix it? That was that layer. Ah, that's part of that layer, that's why. All right, so that's not Rufus's head. Oh, it is. Is that another layer showing though? Or is that just the blend of it? Let's see. Yeah, that's just the blend of it. Okay, so we need to go back in and do a little bit more cleanup. At this point, I probably would just add another mask. Be easier because then I could see it as I'm doing it. Like so. It's just easier. Also want to get rid of that halo. Blend him more into the background. Another giveaway would be the edges. If the edges aren't clean, people can usually tell that you put two things together. All right, there we go, nice and cleaner. Yeah, agreed. I mean, the angle's not perfect, but again, at first glance, that probably wouldn't be what would throw you off. But agreed. The angles aren't always going to be perfect, especially if you have two different people posing at two different times. But you do the best you can. Rufus's head is tilted down a little bit more than the other guy. We could make his head maybe a little bit smaller, move it over a little bit, because now I'm looking at it now, his head looks a little too big for that. But again, these are all things that you would continue to tweak. So with that said, I hope you guys got something out of doing compositing. We work with 3 different examples, a very easy example at first. Let's bring that back up for those of you just joining. So let's get the bride composite. We did this composite earlier, just simply bringing a layer over and flipping it over and masking it out and lowering the opacity. Same person, just a different pose. Then we put this guy on a completely different background. Kind of colored and toned him a little bit to kind of be like the light that he would have been photographed in had he been in this. And then last but not least, we did a quick composite of a guy on a tuxedo. So again, I hope this helps. Yep, the hardest part is finding the right picture. I totally agree. If the pictures were shot perfectly like they were going to be composited, then it works great. But if you're having to guess and match 2 pictures that aren't going to be, weren't photographed specifically for compositing, that's a little bit more challenging. But at the end of the day, if you make few minor tweaks, you can probably pull it off. You can probably make it look like it at a glance, especially when I start putting Rufus on the original poster. Let me bring up that poster, by the way. I can show you guys where this went at one point. This is back when the Skyfall movie came out. So that was the original one I did back in the day. And I can see a little collar issue I need to work on that one. That was the original composite idea. So not bad. And that was like literally done in 5 minutes too. So that was a last minute last minute job. But you get the idea. It's just a matter of how, oh, you're not seeing it. Hold on. There's a Skyfall composite. You get the idea. It's a matter of having a little fun while you're doing your compositing. So with that said, take care. Have a great weekend. And we will catch you on the next one. And you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. Glad you loved it. Luxury Card Store. And you're welcome, Skip. And Eva Cerise, as always, thanks for being here and thanks for moderating. Yep, and I just saw your We Can't See It, but I beat you to it. All right, so with that said, everyone, take care. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody.